Good morning, good afternoon, and I think good evening based off of a couple that I see here. Thank you guys for coming today. If you've been to our webinar series before, this is going to be a little bit different. So if you traditionally come to an Ansira webinar, we talk about channel marketing, MDF and co-op programs, hyper-local execution. Today, we're going to be talking about how to become an AI-first organization. So I'm James Morse. I'm on our growth team. I oversee strategic partnerships and market insights. And I'm joined by my esteemed colleagues, Alex Kryl and Jorge Tite, who are from our AI transformation team. They're really the stars of the show. I'm really just a master of ceremonies. I'm here to kick things off, ask questions occasionally. I'm also in charge of transitioning the slides. So if anything gets hung up, that's 100% on me. You can blame me, not Alex or Jorge. So we're really excited about this. This has really come from a little bit of background on Ansira, if you're not aware. So a little over 2 years ago, Ansira acquired Bremerson Sprout Lab. And our CEO, Paul Tibbett, as we're merging the three companies, really said, we are going to be an AI-first organization, and created the AI transformation team to really enable and empower us to do that in a way that makes us more effective, efficient professionals, and really to drive more value for our clients. So again, a little bit of a different type of approach to a webinar for us, but you're really going to get a behind the scenes look of how we've done this and a lot of the questions that we've been getting from clients. So with that, I will go off screen and I'll hand it off to George and Alex to take this over.
All right, thanks, James. Good morning, everyone. All right, so when we started our journey, as many of you, we didn't know where to start or even if we have enough resources to take a transformation like this. AI is moving very quickly. The tool is evolving every day, and the expectations from leaderships and clients are high. So it's completely understandable if you feel pressured to act even when the sequence is not clear. And that was the case for us. And the thing is that there's no playbook. James, can you move to the next one, please? Right? So there was no playbook that we can use to drive an AI transformation. Everybody was trying to understand how this works. And like us, probably you start pathfinding. And that means that you start rolling out some tools like ChatGPT, Claude, whatever is out there. You start running some proof of concepts. You start identifying your AI champions, and even you might have stood an AI council. Now, in our case, some of these things were working, but some of them were not necessarily working. And meanwhile, we have our leadership wanted to see the return of investment. And the gap wasn't necessarily lack of effort. We were doing the work. We were building all these different parts, but we will realize is that we were missing that connecting tissue to help us to build a system. And the good news is that you can build that system. But before that, we need to reframe the problem. So most organizations begin this conversation by asking what tool or model we should be using or buying. What is the platform that we are going to standardize? Who is going to own AI within the organization? And while those are very important questions, it's not the first question that we should be asking. What we realize is that the first question that we should ask is how work will change. Because at the core, AI transformation is about redesigning how decisions are made, how people access knowledge, how the work moves through the organization, and where we want to keep human judgment on the top of the loop. Now, let's move and talk about how we see an AI-first organization. At Ansira, we define an AI-first organization as a business that treats AI not as a supporting tool or isolated capability, but as a core operating principle that shapes strategy, product, decision-making, and competitive positioning. An AI-first organization tends to have a few structural characteristics in common. In our case, will be AI-native strategy, embedded decision intelligence, the redesign of workflows, data as an strategic asset, organizational design changes, and explicit support from leadership. And it's good to have this because this helps us to understand where is our destination. With this, the next question is, how do we assess where the organization is actually today. And this is one of the things that we struggled at the beginning because there was not common language to talk about AI maturity. And without that common language, every conversation became subjective. So we borrowed this framework that has basically 5 levels from level 1, which is AI curious, to level 5, AI native. And the key move on this is to apply this assessment per function in your organization, not necessarily as a company as a whole. And the strategic value of doing this is that you are not choosing a universal target. In reality, what you are doing is defining the gap between where you believe you operate and where you actually operate. So, for example, you might want to take a functional part of your organization, like operation, and determine that they currently operate at level 2, and the desired next level, or the one level that you want to reach, is going to be level 4. Whereas in other area of your organization that might be operating at a level 1, and you might choose to reach a different level, a level 3, and that's perfectly fine, right? Now, before we talk about James.
I was just going to say it would be helpful too if you hop in the chat. I would love to do a poll. Poll is impossible in this, but if you hop in the chat, let us know where you think you are, whether your organization, could be your team, could be you personally, where you think you fall in the maturity level. There's no shame in this whatsoever, but I think it'll help normalize, how we do these in the future. Sorry, George. Thanks.
Oh, no worries. All right. So thank you. Before we talk about how to move, it helps to have a short picture of what we are looking at. And there are usually 9 dimensions identified when you're talking about an AI transformation. At the beginning, like many people, we were just focusing on a few of them, probably 3 or 4. But when you look at the AI transformation, you need to take in consideration all these dimensions. And what I would like to do is invite you to take note of the 2 or 3 that you probably have been ignoring. Even better, if you can share it in the chat, that would be great. But this is exactly where the maturity conversation starts and becomes useful. Now, the next thing that you should expect friction. Because in traditional and linear organization, this is going to create barriers that are going to prevent the organization from leveraging AI efficiently. And those barriers are the information friction, the decision bottlenecks, and the functional boundaries. The reason for that is because when AI meets hierarchy, it rewrites how decisions get made, who makes those decisions, and how fast the organization can learn and evolve. All of this is going to collide with the current company culture, the roles that you have in place, and the obvious resistance to change. What is important to highlight here is that AI only wins this battle when organizations are willing to rethink how they operate. Therefore, leadership support is key. Now, let's talk about the AI transformation framework at Ansira. Our transformation framework was designed with 2 tracks, the people transformation and the business transformation. Both of them are equally important. One depends on each other, and they must advance together. This basically creates the structure to have alignment, that capability building, the change management, the process redesign, and the value creation that you need to support your transformation efforts. Now, let's talk about the people track. And our suggestion is that you start here. Meet the people where they are. And the idea is simple, is building a system that first assess where your workforce is currently at in terms of AI literacy. That's going to help you to identify where the gap is. And the second step is take those learnings and develop a pathway that helps you to close the gap to the immediate next level, not to the ideal level. So if you are trying to go from level 1 to level 4, you need to first go to level 2 and level 3 and so on and so on. So this is a process that you're going to repeat multiple times. right? And this builds capability in a deliberative way. Now, let me turn to the business track, which is where most of the concrete sequence lives. All right. So and it seems that we have this slideshow that's missing, but we have, as part of the business track, we have 5 steps. And these 5 steps are not necessarily sequential steps that you need to perform. Some of these steps can be happening in parallel. And as a matter of fact, in our case, we started with step number 1 and step 4, which is number 1 is identifying the work itself, and step 4 is creating the governance at the same time. The reason for that is because we wanted to have basic governance that help us to lead all our transformation efforts moving on, right? Now, the first step is first identified where your bottlenecks are. This is going to help you to know where the knowledge is hard to access, where your teams are spending time on repetitive work, where the decisions are slowed down by fragmentation, manual review, or poor visibility. All this matters because if you start just with features, the problem is that you create experimentation, but without direction. If you start with friction, you create relevance from the get-go. The next step is once you have identified the friction, you need a way to qualify and prioritize. In our case, we have the Center of Excellence, which uses a use case or where your use cases are qualified and prioritized through a structured intake review process where business value complexity determines the development path and the priority. This is important because it answers the first pain point: where do we start? With this, we can move now to the next step, which is redefining workflows. AI transformation really becomes powerful and meaningful when workflows change. That means deciding way AI is going to be used to draft, to summarize, to recommend, to retrieve, or automate, and where the humans remain at the top of the review process, the approval, and owning the outcomes. With that, now you move into a step 4, which is building the governance. And this is important to keep in mind that you don't want to separate adoption from governance. At Ansira, the governance is built around a formal risk assessment, impact assessment, approved tool usage, lifecycle management, and clearly defined accountability across leadership, information security, legal, and department leaders. And all of this is built in parallel with enablement, not bolted afterward. And the final step here is scaling this out through the Center of Excellence. And this is the structural move that let us scale without having or requiring a large central system. And this is exactly the story that turns the concept to a mechanism. So now I'm going to pass the mic to Alex, who is going to walk you through the operational structure that made all of this practical for us.
All right. Thank you, George. So yeah, George walked you through the strategic setup, and I'll focus on the structure that we use to run all of this day to day through our Center of Excellence. And I want to tie this directly back to the 2 questions from the beginning. So where do we start? And for us, the answer is an intake and prioritization process. So that use cases come in through one door, and there is a clear way to know and decide what gets worked on. And the second question is, how do we resource this? And our answer to that is by spreading the capability across the business instead of putting everything on one central team. One thing I want to say up front, what you will see in the next slides is the full picture as it runs today. So obviously we did not build it like this on day one, but we started with 2 pieces, in our case, governance and the use case pipeline. And I'll come back to those at the end as well. And one more thing to mention, everything I show works at different scales. So You can build this across a whole company or within a single division or department. Yeah, as I mentioned, the first part for us was the Center of Excellence to set it up. So the first decision here is how to structure the COE. And essentially, there are three options. On the one extreme, you have the fully centralized Center of Excellence, where one team owns the AI strategy, the standards, development, and everything for the whole organization. That way you get maximum control and one clear chain of accountability, which makes sense in strictly regulated environments, such as banking, healthcare, or insurance. But the requirement is that you have the headcount for that central team. Now, the other extreme is the fully decentralized model, where essentially every department owns its own AI work. Advantage is that it's fast, and it sometimes is the only realistic option when a company is very large or very spread out locally. The price of that is consistency. So quality, security, and shared learning all obviously become harder because of the decentralization. And then the middle ground is the hybrid COE setup. So in this setup, you have a small central team that provides the supporting structure, and the departments implement the AI and automation use cases locally. And that is also the model that we currently run at Ansira. So not because it's the best model in general, but because it fits our situation. And we didn't have the headcount for a large central team, but we still need consistent standards. And yeah, your constraints might point you to a different model, and that's a totally valid outcome as well. So yeah, so if you're responsible for one organization within a larger company, you'll recognize the same question essentially one level down. So do you build one AI team for your whole organization, or does every team run its own approach? The trade-offs are exactly the same. So yeah. And for the next slides, I'll use the hybrid model to show you how all of these pieces in the COE fit together. Almost everything you'll see, the governance, the pipeline, the champions, all of that applies to all three models. It's just the execution looks a bit different. And the hybrid model simply shows the interplay very well between the central team and the departments. So the question is, how does the hybrid Center of Excellence split the work, right? So essentially, we have one central team that owns the direction. So that means strategy, standards, shared platforms, etc. And then the departments, they own the local implementations. So they know where their problems are, they build the solutions, and they drive the adoption in their own teams. And if we zoom in a little bit on the building itself, that also happens in two ways. So the first is what we call citizen development. That means that people from the business, not engineers, build agents and automations for their own workflows. So they are using approved low-code or no-code tools for this. Advantage is nobody has to wait for an IT backlog. And these solutions actually get used because the person who built them sits right next to the problem. Think of a team building an agent that checks deliverables against brand compliance and guidelines, or a team that automates its own reporting, right? So the second line of delivery is a small technical delivery team for those use cases that are too complex for citizen development. So because maybe they require deeper integrations, they're multi-step automations, etc. So they still have the same rules, but the engineering depth is just deeper. And essentially, what I want to leave you with here is, for this section, is if you let everyone build without structure, you get inconsistent quality, right? So security gaps, and also nobody learns from each other. And that's exactly where the job of the central layer comes in. So with that hybrid model, you get a clear entry point, which for us answered, where do we start? And it also runs on people that we already have. So this also answers the question, how do we resource it? And if we zoom in a little bit more on the Center of Excellence, how we structured it, we essentially see 6 different components. So it's governance, enablement and training, the AI champion network, intake and prioritization, and an operating cadence and tooling. But to be clear, this is the finished picture as it runs today. So we did not stand up all 6 at once, and you probably won't either. But I just wanted wanted you to see the whole thing first, because each piece here covers a gap that the others leave open. And as we go through them, the useful question for you may be more, or not that much whether we did this well. It's more, what would our version of this look like? You know? So diving a little bit deeper into the governance part, for us, as George already mentioned, governance is the foundation. So, but it also should not be a one-size-fits-all. So one process for everything either slows everything down or it protects nothing, usually somewhere in between there. So that's why we decided to run it in 2 ways, depending on the type of work that we see in the company. So for the larger, more complex use cases, as mentioned, that's where we have a formal assessment before the development starts. So business value, risk, and complexity are all part of the considerations that we take in, that we take here. And that assessment is not there to just slow things down. It's actually how we prioritize. So we want to understand the value, the risk, and the complexity before we even invest in development time. And for the citizen development part, we do take a different approach. So here we do not put a review in front of every agent that someone builds. We wouldn't be able to keep up, and most of these builds are low risk anyway. So instead, the risk is handled in the tool setup itself. So the tools that we use have primarily read access first. The write access is only to certain internal systems. We have no automated external communication, no external access into the platform, etc. So all these guardrails are built into the tools, not into a review meeting. And the result is that governance does not become a bottleneck for that small work, but it also doesn't disappear. And that matters because the real problems all come from ungoverned work. So imagine something goes to production on an unapproved tool. You get a security incident, legal needs to get involved. And essentially all of this is avoidable. And the way I think about it is that governance is not what slows you down. It's what keeps you from having to roll things back. And this doesn't have to be heavy. If you operate inside a larger company, you probably do not own legal or IT security. In that case, the practical version is to agree with them once on an approved tool list and data rules for AI. And yeah, after that, your teams can build inside those lines without asking for permission every time. So that's the governance part. The second component is enablement. And those two really belong tightly together because tools plus rules without skills means essentially nothing happens, right? So that's why we built a 3-tier fluency pathway. And tier 1 is mandatory for everyone. So that's a short self-paced module, 30 to 45 minutes. It covers what AI is, how to use our approved tools safely, ethics, and practical examples. So here, everyone gets certified. And that gives us a shared baseline across the company. And it also gives us something concrete to show to clients when they ask how our people are trained. Tier 2, is team-specific and voluntary. So that's more hands-on training built around real use cases from and for that team's daily work. And then tier 3 goes one level deeper even into the specific functions within each team. And one thing also that we learned along the way, especially regarding enablement, is that this is never done. So as you know, AI is advancing at a rapid speed. So the tools change every quarter and the training has to be able to keep moving too. Which is why we run weekly open hours, regular sessions, and obviously a lot of peer-to-peer learning. And peer-to-peer is actually a good keyword because that is the next component, the AI champion network. So every department nominates 1 or 2 AI champions. And these are not the most technical people. So they're domain experts. They know the processes. They can work with the AI tools. And most importantly, their colleagues listen to them. So their job is to own the AI topics in their department. They bring use cases and gaps to the COE, and they also share what works with the other departments. And this is the honest answer to the question, how do you scale without a headcount? So here we see a central team of 2 or 3 people who obviously cannot support hundreds of colleagues, right? So that's why we have 12 or to 15 champions, each inside their own team. And that way you have a colleague showing you how to use AI in your actual workflow, which is far more effective than any training video from a central team. And also one important caveat, this only works if the role is taken seriously. So our champions have protected time for it. It's part of their goals, not an extra duty on top of a full workload. And if the champion role is only a title, the network looks good on a slide, but it doesn't really do anything in practice. Next component that we have is the intake and prioritization. So here we can answer the question, where do we start? Because this becomes a working process instead of a discussion, right? So every larger use case goes through 5 stages: requested, discovery, development, live, and decommissioned and rejected at some point. And each stage has an owner and clear criteria for moving on. And for prioritization, we score 3 things during discovery. So business value, complexity, and risk. And then everything lands on a simple impact and effort matrix for prioritization. Now, the biggest advantage is that this becomes your single source of truth for all AI use cases in the organization. As you're all aware, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So once every initiative lives in one place, a whole set of things becomes possible that was not possible before. You can share knowledge across teams because you can see who built what. You can measure the performance and the impact each use case actually delivers. And you can report progress to leadership with real numbers instead of anecdotes. And maybe the most encouraging part here is version 1 of this was not a platform. It was a list. So you can start this in a spreadsheet next week. And what matters is not the tool. What matters is that the pipeline is visible and the trade-offs are out in the open. So if you're wondering what the very first concrete step in your organization could be, it's probably this one. 2 more components briefly. So the first is cadence. So a pipeline without a rhythm around it stalls. So that's why we have 3 recurring meetings. So we have an operational one for blockers and cross-team use cases, an organizational one where we ask what is holding people back and what the COE itself should do better, and then a strategic one each quarter to set the focus. And second is the tooling. So our rule is standardize where you can, specialize where you must. So we have a small set of enterprise-grade AI tools that cover most of our use cases. So roughly 1 for the business users and 1 for the technical side. And if a use case generally needs something outside that stack, that's where the review process, that's where a review process comes in. So, but yeah, the standard stack is the default, and exceptions need a justification. And this discipline is also what makes the citizen development guardrails enforceable in the first place. So yeah, that's the full model. So 6 components. Now let me actually get back to what I promised at the beginning and show you the 2 pieces that we can actually start with. We did not launch all of this on day 1, as I already said. So we picked 2 things we could do realistically, and we tried to do these properly. So I'm sharing them because they are the most transferable part of our story for now. So the first was governance. So our AI management system is aligned with ISO 42001, so the international standard for AI management systems, along with our existing certifications. And what that changed in practice is the client conversation. So the question used to be, how do you handle our data and AI systems? But now it is, walk us through your governance framework. And honestly, that's a much better conversation to be in. And if you work with clients or partners, sooner or later, you might run into that same question as well. But to be clear, you do not need an ISO certification to get started. What you need from day one is something concrete and written down. So an approved tool list, a data handling policy for AI, a simple impact assessment template. So something written down, enforced, and reviewed. And that's what makes governance real. And the second one is the use case pipeline. So one of the first things we built was the intake tracking system. And it gave leadership visibility into all AI activity across the company for the first time. So today it holds 187 use cases since the start, and more than 90 of them are live. But the number is not really the point. So the point is what the visibility made possible. So it's prioritized, governed, measurable AI work at scale without a big central team and without a multi-year program before anything happens. And yeah, and now let me close the loop on the two questions from the start. So where do we start? With the pipeline. So a simple intake, a way to score what comes in, visible to leadership. And once it exits, the work itself tells you where to start. And how do we resource this? With a structure that distributes the work. So a central team plus champions in the departments gets you much further than any headcount request, and you can grow into it. So you do not need to build it all up front. And if I compress the whole path into one sequence, it's this. So assess honestly where you are, define what AI first means for your business specifically, get governance in place first, the approved tools, the data rules, a simple assessment template, and put intake and prioritization on top. So build enablement in from the start, not afterwards, and choose the structure that fits your situation, knowing it will evolve it. And the point is not to copy our org chart as well. So the 6 components are the same everywhere, but how you set each one up depends on your company. So your size, your structure, your constraints, that's what makes this repeatable. And the organizations that do well with AI will not be the ones that started with the most resources. They'll be the ones that built the clearest mechanism for deciding what to work on and grew from there. Now, these 2 books map those 2 halves of today. So we have, just to leave you with some book recommendations, so we have The AI-Driven Leader by Geoff Woods for the individual side, and then also Using AI as a Thinking Partner for Strategic Decisions. And Hyper-Adaptive by Melissa Reeve is the organization side. So how an enterprise rewires itself to become AI native with a stage progression similar to the maturity model George showed. And one for you, one for how you lead, and one for how you manage the organization. And we'll include both links in the follow-up. And yeah, so now we have some time left, and this is the part that we enjoy the most. So while you're thinking about your questions, here are 3 to take with you. So where do you honestly sit on the maturity model? What is your biggest source of friction right now? And which structure fits your situation? So centralized, decentralized, or hybrid. Whatever is on your mind, cost, ROI, resistance in the organization, how long until you see first results, etc. So we're happy to get specific. Yeah. So who wants to start?
We had a couple of questions come through. Let me pull these up for you guys too. So I think very helpful. One of the questions that came through is just asking, will you get access to this presentation? So absolutely, we hope that means that you found this extremely helpful and want some pieces. So yes, we will absolutely do that. Alex, a question came through during your part a couple of slides ago, which I thought was interesting is, do you guys find yourselves declining a lot of these pipeline requests or ideas that are coming in either from the champions within the network or just other people? I think you said 180 something that are there. How much of those are decline potentially or actively exploring? What does that roadmap kind of look like?
Right. So yeah, of course there are some that we have to decline, but instead of just leaving the requester with a declined use case, we also try to see if there's something else that we can do. We obviously do have, for instance, if it's a reporting request, right, then we might want to work with our data team to see if this is something that should be taken over by them, etc. So it's it's not that we just decline and say good luck with it, essentially. But of course, these cases do exist where it also then makes sense to have a look at the broader picture as well, because what we aim to do as well to move away from essentially bolting AI and automation on top, but rather rethink how the work is done. And if there is some friction within the process, then usually it hints to additional topics to have a look at within that process.
That's perfect. And I will just kind of double click into something you said too, just the enablement and how you all do the office hours and the different training sessions. I think we're all probably exhausted in general by training because you get the infosec that you have to do each year. But one of the things I'm always most impressed by is the amount of people that show up to office hours for you all and do the trainings. I think there's such a interest and hunger for this type of exploration, and that there's a willingness to. So if you're listening in and you're thinking about, well, my org's kind of anti that, or you're thinking about lunch and learns and just how exhausting those can be at times, and it's just another thing to sit through. These are probably the most interactive ones I've ever sat through in my career. So you can see just the interest from your organization throughout. Okay, so George, I'll throw this one over to you. It's kind of a two-parter, and it's an extremely loaded question. So let me hit that. It's a two-parter here. How long does it take to fully implement AI into an organization? So I think just reflecting on how long has it taken us in that regard? And then one is, how expensive is it to implement that? And my guess is that's probably around the tools that we're using and not necessarily around resources, but you can take it however.
Yeah, those are very good questions. And unfortunately, the answer is it all depends, okay? As Alex mentioned, there's going to be different situations that each organization needs to look at. So one of them is going to be, for example, in which industry they operate, right? So it's not going to be the same thing if you are in a highly regulated industry like finance versus if you are in retail, for example. There's going to be also, or we need to acknowledge the size of the company. So how big? Obviously, a smaller company is easy to pivot, changes, make experiments. Rather than a larger organization, it's going to take quite some time. It might require a different or also a structural setup for your center of excellence. So there's no right answer, but one of the things that I can take or I can say from our personal experience is that we wouldn't be able to accomplish what we were able to accomplish in a very short period of time if we didn't have that initial support from leadership. As you mentioned, James, at the beginning, the mandate came from Paul, right? When we had this merger across different organizations, hey, we want to be a first AI first organization, and that helped us a lot. Definitely, it made my work simpler because I didn't have to fight with other departments or other leaders in this transformation. So it became a really collaborative process, and I think that's one of the key aspects that I would suggest everybody looks for, is to get that support and build that collaboration across the organization, because that is actually the really determining factor, the barrier that is going to determine how fast your transformation is going to happen, right? Now, in terms of how costly, same idea. It all depends, because, I mean, if we are talking about tooling, it's not the same thing rolling a tool for 100 people company versus 10,000 people, right? So costs are going to change. Now, one of the things that unfortunately you're going to see with AI is that now AI is moving into this paradigm of pay as you go. So that's something that now we have taken, or we are taking measures in place, so then we can monitor how those tokens are used, how people is using AI, so we get that return of investment on what's happening. So point here, what I'm trying to bring at is that don't think about so much about the spend, well, that's an important piece. Don't get me wrong, but what is also important is that monitoring that you need to have to know that every dollar that you are spending is giving you something back. If you don't have that structure, then you're going to be missing, and it's going to be very hard to explain to leadership the ROI.
It's fair. I think it's also valid to say we're not one of those companies that has token scoreboards up for our developers to see how many tokens they can spend or anything. We need to see the value behind it. Okay, there's a couple other questions, but I want to pick out one. I want to be sensitive to people who might be heading into lunch. So either of you kind of take this, but it's our teams and partners are hesitant about AI use, which is interesting because sometimes I think it's mid 2026. I think we're all on board. And then I talk to a random friend who's just like, I don't want to touch AI. And I'm just flabbergasted by it. I don't understand at all. But I think it's obviously there. It exists. How do we get them on board? So I guess for you both, like, how have you seen that even with Ansira? Have there been those detractors or people hesitant, and how have you looped them in?
Yeah. So, and I think that's it's something that is going to happen because even it happens to us, right? So we are deployers of AI, so we're going to be using the providers of AI. And the fear is that we don't know how those companies are going to be using our data, or if we establish a relationship with them, are they going to be using our data to train the models? Are they going to be using in a safe way? Is the data going to remain secure and private? So all these concerns happen, and I could understand also why our clients are hesitant and sometimes in that way, right? So in the way that we're trying to tackle this is building trust. And that's the reason why we decided to pursue this ISO 42001 certification, which is, it's not a very a simple process. It requires a high level degree of checks, of processes that we need to have in place to comply. So that's the way that we are mitigating, and we are looking in that way to demonstrate to our clients that they can trust on us, because in the first place, we are setting the same standards that they are requiring from us, from our vendors. So we are not necessarily using things that we are not going to be offering or being able to provide to our clients. But that's the way that we are trying to build this. Now, the other thing is also that we need to realize that at this point in the stage, AI is here to stay. So eventually, you need to realize that every single product, every single software company is going to start using AI because it helps. It's helpful, right? So this is something that is going to continue to evolve, and you just need to be aware and understand how the technology does and operates, so then you can have the right arguments or the right knowledge to know when things could go wrong or where things might not operate in the way that you're expecting.
I think that's fair. None of us want to get left behind in our careers. Okay, so the marketing team makes sure that we plug everything that's next. So I have to do this piece too. So we have a second part of our SEO and AO for channel marketers series coming up in October. So stay tuned for details and a date there. If you missed part one, it is amazing. So scan the QR code, definitely watch that piece. And then if you still have any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to any of us directly. So our information is here. You're probably going to reach out to Jorge or Alex over me, but I understand and I won't be offended. But you're more than welcome to reach out to any of us. We hope this was super helpful. We hope that you can take this and run with it in your organization. But if you run into any hiccups or challenges, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you all for your time today. Jorge, Alex, thank you guys. This is very insightful and we appreciate it. And we hope to do another one of these again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.